Have you ever looked outside and noticed something that made absolutely no sense? Yesterday, that tree was empty, not a single bird. But today, it's overflowing. Hundreds of birds, sometimes thousands, all packed into one ordinary tree. Not the tree beside it, not the one across the street, just that one. They arrive from every direction. Some land high in the branches. Others squeeze into the smallest gaps they can find. The air fills with wings. The noise becomes almost overwhelming. For a few minutes, it feels as if every bird in the neighborhood has been called to the exact same place. And then, almost as suddenly as they arrived, they're gone. The tree falls silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. Most people assume it was random. Maybe that tree just happened to look comfortable. Maybe there was a little more food. Maybe birds simply like gathering together. But none of those explanations come close to the truth. Because when hundreds of birds choose one single tree, they're usually responding to something you can't see. Sometimes they're preparing for one of the most important moments of their day. Sometimes they're following invisible signals drifting through the air. Sometimes they're sensing changes in the weather long before humans notice them. And one reason is so strange. It almost sounds impossible. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a crowded tree the same way again, because what seems like a noisy flock is often one of nature's most carefully organized events. The first secret begins every evening, just before the sun disappears. As daylight starts to fade, something remarkable begins to happen. A few birds appear, then a few dozen, then hundreds, from rooftops, telephone wires, backyards, and distant fields. They all begin flying toward the same destination. If you've ever watched a large group of crows gathering at sunset, you've probably wondered what all the noise is about. They chase each other. They argue. They hop from branch to branch. Some even seem to wrestle in midair before landing. To us, it looks chaotic, but to the bird, it's anything but. Scientists have discovered that many social birds, especially crows, don't simply fly straight to bed. Instead, they hold something surprisingly similar to a nightly gathering, almost like a town square filling up at the end of a long day. Birdwatchers call these places staging sites. Think of them as waiting rooms before bedtime. Birds from different directions arrive one flock at a time. Some have spent the entire day searching for food miles away. Others have been defending territories or raising young. But as evening approaches, they all converge on the same familiar tree. And this isn't a small gathering. In some cities, a single evening roost can attract several thousand crows. Imagine standing beneath one tree, while wave after wave of black birds keeps arriving from every direction. The branches begin to disappear beneath feathers. The sound echoes across entire neighborhoods. It feels less like wildlife and more like a giant convention. But why? Why not simply fly to sleep? Because sleeping alone can be dangerous. For a bird, night is one of the most vulnerable times of the entire day. They can't search for food. They can't see predators as easily. And once they're asleep, their chances of escaping an attack become much smaller. So instead of facing the darkness alone, they gather together. Hundreds of watchful eyes are far better than two. If one bird notices danger, the entire flock reacts almost instantly. It's one of nature's oldest survival strategies, safety through numbers. But protection isn't the only reason. Researchers have also noticed something even more fascinating. These gatherings aren't always silent waiting rooms. They're loud, very loud. The birds constantly call to one another. They change positions. They interact with individuals they've met before. Some scientists believe these nightly assemblies allow birds to exchange valuable information, where food was plentiful, which areas were dangerous, and even help younger birds learn from older, more experienced ones. In other words, that noisy tree outside your window may not simply be full of birds. It could be full of conversations, almost like thousands of neighbors meeting after work, sharing stories before heading home for the night. And then, something extraordinary happens. Without any obvious signal, the entire flock suddenly lifts into the air. Thousands of wings beat almost at once. For a brief moment, the sky turns black with moving birds. Then they disappear together, toward a hidden roost where they'll spend the night. It happens so quickly. You'd swear someone. You'd swear someone gave them an invisible command. But that mysterious departure raises an even bigger question. Because not every crowded tree is a meeting place. Sometimes, birds gather for a completely different reason. Not to sleep, not to socialize, but because the tree itself has quietly asked for help. It sounds impossible, because for a very long time, scientists believed it was. After all, trees don't have voices. They can't wave their branches. They can't cry out when something is wrong. So how could one ordinary tree suddenly attract dozens of birds, while every tree around it is almost empty? The answer is something nature has been hiding in plain sight. Because when a tree is under attack, it doesn't stay silent. Imagine a caterpillar no bigger than your thumb. It lands on a leaf, takes one bite, then another, and another. To us, it's barely noticeable. But to the tree, it's an emergency. And instead of fighting with teeth or claws, the tree does something far more extraordinary. It releases invisible chemicals into the air. Not random chemicals, but a unique cocktail of airborne scents that scientists call distress signals. They're impossible for us to smell. You could stand directly beneath that tree and never notice a thing. But somewhere nearby, a bird might. For years, researchers assumed birds found insects almost entirely with their eyesight. They watched leaves move. They spotted tiny shapes crawling across branches. Simple. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until experiments began revealing something completely unexpected. Certain birds weren't just seeing their next meal, they were smelling it. When scientists placed birds near branches carrying the scent of insect-damaged trees, the birds repeatedly chose those branches first, even when the insects themselves were hidden. It was as if the tree had whispered, "Dinner is over here." Suddenly, those mysterious gatherings made a lot more sense. Imagine walking through a neighborhood. Most restaurants are empty, but one is packed. Without knowing anything else, you'd probably assume the food there is incredible. Birds make a similar decision. If one tree is releasing chemical signals that insects are feeding inside it, that tree becomes the hottest restaurant in the forest. Before long, chickadees arrive, then warblers, then nuthatches. One after another, they land in exactly the same place. To anyone watching from the ground, it looks completely random, as if every bird simply decided to choose that tree by coincidence. But high above your head, an invisible invitation has already been sent. The birds are simply answering it. And the tree benefits too, because every hungry bird pecking through its leaves removes another caterpillar, another beetle, another insect that would have continued eating. Without saying a single word, the tree recruits an army. The birds get a feast, the tree gets protection. Both survive. It's one of nature's quietest partnerships, and it has probably happened in your own backyard without you ever realizing it. The next time you see several birds suddenly crowd into one ordinary tree, look closely, not at the birds, at the leaves. You might notice tiny holes, chewed edges, curled branches, hidden signs of an insect invasion. The birds noticed them long before you did. Or perhaps they didn't notice them at all. Perhaps they smelled them. But here's where the mystery becomes even stranger. Sometimes, the birds gathering together aren't even the same species. Bluebirds, chickadees, nuthatches, warblers, woodpeckers. Birds that normally spend their days doing completely different things suddenly move through the forest together, almost like a perfectly organized team. Why would birds that compete for food choose to hunt side by side? The answer reveals one of the smartest survival strategies in the entire bird world. At first glance, it doesn't make any sense. A chickadee, a nuthatch, a titmouse, a tiny warbler, sometimes even a woodpecker. Completely different birds with different voices, different colors, and different ways of finding food. Yet somehow they all move through the same trees together. If one bird flies, they all fly. If one stops, They all stop. From a distance, it almost looks like one giant flock. But it isn't. It's something even more remarkable. Scientists call these mixed species flocks, and they reveal a surprising truth about the bird world. Competition, though, isn't always the best survival strategy. Sometimes cooperation wins. Imagine walking into a crowded grocery store with a group of friends. One person checks the bakery, another searches the produce aisle, someone else heads for the frozen food. Instead of everyone looking in the same place, the work is divided. Everyone finds what they need faster. That's exactly what happens in these bird flocks. Each species has its own specialty. Nuthatches race headfirst down tree trunks, searching deep inside bark for hidden beetles. Woodpeckers hammer into thick wood, reaching insects that nobody else can reach. Warblers inspect the smallest leaves, where tiny caterpillars hide. Chickadees seem to check almost everything, darting from twig to twig with incredible speed. They're not competing over the same meal. They're searching different parts of the same tree. And something fascinating begins to happen. As one bird moves, it accidentally disturbs insects hiding nearby. A spider drops from a leaf. A beetle crawls out of the bark. A caterpillar wriggles to another branch. Suddenly, though, another bird catches it. Without even trying, they're helping each other find food. One bird flushes prey, another bird catches it. The entire flock becomes far more efficient than any single bird could ever be alone. But food isn't the biggest advantage. Safety is. Imagine you're alone in a forest. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound makes you stop. Now imagine standing beside 30 friends, all watching different directions. The chances of missing a predator become much smaller. Birds understand this instinctively. Biologists call it the many eyes effect. The more birds watching, the sooner someone spots danger. And when one bird notices a hawk, everything changes in an instant. A single alarm call explodes through the trees. Within seconds, every bird freezes, dives into cover, or disappears into the forest. It doesn't matter if they're the same species. They all understand the warning. It's like dozens of different languages sharing one universal word: danger. That's why these flocks can seem almost magical. One moment, the tree is overflowing with life. The next, every bird vanishes so quickly, it feels as though they dissolved into the air. But perhaps the most surprising part is that these flocks don't stay in one place. They travel, slowly, steadily, moving from tree to tree like a living wave. Birdwatchers sometimes describe them as tiny tornadoes passing through the forest. You might hear them before you ever see them. A burst of chirps, fluttering wings, leaves shaking overhead. Then suddenly, boom, every branch around you seems alive. For 5 minutes, you're surrounded. And then, they move on, leaving the forest strangely quiet once again. If you've ever experienced that, you've witnessed one of nature's best organized hunting teams. No leader barking orders, no written plan, just thousands of years of evolution, teaching different species that sometimes working together is smarter than working alone. But even these incredible hunting parties aren't the strangest reason birds suddenly crowd into one tree. Because every so often, the birds aren't looking for food at all. They're watching the sky long before the first raindrop falls, before thunder rolls across the horizon, before weather apps send you a notification. The birds already know something is coming, and what they do next has fooled people for centuries.